Hey, it's Sean from the Commander's Brew. This week we're doing Ertai the Corrupted, countering things by sacrificing creatures or enchantments. Are we doing tokens? Nah. Are we doing regular enchantments? Nah. We're doing sagas. Ertai the Corrupted sagas. And Darksteel Eric's here. Oh, hey, Darksteel Eric here. Just reminding you that I control the show because I represent Darksteel Industries, who is your main sponsor because you signed a contract without reading it. Okay, what is it? So, Sean, I have a question for you. Oh, usually you just kind of tell me what to do. Okay, go ahead. I need your opinion on something. What is your opinion on Updog? Your opinion on Updog, please. I don't have one. No, you're supposed to say, "What's up, dog?" Oh, nothing. What's up with you, dog? You called me dog. That means we're pals now. Ah, Feldegriff. This is Ertai the Corrupted Sagas. Ertai is an old commander that has been updated to be a Phyrexian human wizard. Anyway, we can pay a blue to sacrifice a creature or enchantment to counter target spell. It's a bit villainy, but I don't mind. We gotta have stuff to sacrifice, and I think sagas are great. We got a whole bunch of flip sagas like Restoration of Aganjo, we've got the Fall of Lord Konda, Michiko's Reign of Truth, and we're ultimately prepared to sack any one of these before we get to the end. If we have to, we can use Ertai's ability to sacrifice one of these to counter a spell, but we will have definitely gotten some value on it. Maybe it's a little bit of extra land in the terms of Restoration of Iganjo. Maybe it's a little bit of recursion if we get to Chapter 2. Fall of Lord Konda's a removal spell for something big, even if we have to use it to counter a spell later on. And Michiko's Reign of Truth is kind of what this deck is doing. Just a bunch of +1/+1 things because we'll have a lot of enchantments. And then they'll flip into creatures, so even if we have to use this ability then, we'll have a creature and or enchantment to sacrifice. Counts as both. And I think the classic sagas are even more interesting in this regard because they end up sacrificing themselves. So if we need to, we can sacrifice them beforehand. We got to make sure we get some value up top. Elspeth Conquers Death pays us off right away by exiling something. I would love for this to get to the end, but if I can't, so be it. Rite of Belzenlot's very nice because it also makes a bunch of cleric creature tokens, which we can sacrifice to counter spells. I would rather sacrifice sagas, but I'll take these little cleric creature tokens. And there might be a world where we'd actually want to sacrifice this before we make that 6/6 demon. Maybe we don't have the creatures to sacrifice for it. And Minimize Prophecy is one of those classic sagas that actually goes up to 4 chapters. There aren't too many of those. This is nice because we get the main value after chapter 3, and then we have a whole other turn before that kind of useless 4th chapter as sack fodder to counter a spell. Ooh, and while we're at it, I want to talk about Puka's Mischief. It's another enchantment. Again, enchantments are good in this deck, but I would love to exchange control of a couple of these sagas that plan on sacrificing themselves anyway. I'll take your 4-drop and you can take my 4-drop saga that's going to disappear and, I don't know, do something dumb for you. That's a neat move. And so as of this recording, the Dominaria United spoilers are just about to start, so I don't know how many new sagas we're getting, but there's 35 not counting those. Quick spoiler check. I'm cutting this part in at the last possible second before I release this episode to talk about any new cards that have come out for Dominaria United. It's still not a full complete list yet, so I don't know how many extra sagas there are, but definitely there are some. And they have this cool thing. The phasing of Zalfir, for example, has read ahead, so you just get to start wherever you want on the saga. Obviously, they built it in because for this one, you get to phase something out and protect it from the eventual board wipe that happens. Also, a board wipe in blue? I mean, you get creatures back for it, but that's pretty cool. We haven't seen too many other sagas yet, but it's definitely worth talking about Zur the Eternal Schemer. I mean, Ertai is our commander, also a Phyrexian, but I feel like Zur is going to be pretty good in the 99. All of our enchantment creatures, that is all of those sagas that flipped over and all of our constellation creatures, Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof. And that second ability can turn sagas into creatures which can attack, which seems fine. I mean, you might want to do it, you might not. That ability becomes super cool with Golden Argosy. It only crews for 1, but as you may recall, you're allowed to crew for way overboard if you want to. We can turn a bunch of sagas that will sacrifice themselves into enchantment creatures with the new Zur, use all of them to crew the Golden Argosy, and then when we attack with it, they'll all bounce and come back reset, fresh from the top, sticking around, doing more stuff. We can also do our regular enchantment creatures, turn those back into sagas. It's like these cards were made for this deck. That's all I got for you this time. That's all that's out. Who knows? By the time this is released, maybe something else cool is in there. Let me know in the comments. Now, obviously, if Ertai's on the battlefield, our opponents will want to get rid of him. So we need ways to protect him. Cradle of Safety and Starlit Mantle are kind of interesting because they are flash enchantments that make Ertai hexproof. So our opponents might try to sling a removal spell at Ertai, expecting us to use our blue mana, tap it, maybe sacrifice a different enchantment, and now they have to use another spell to do it. Well, this time we can put a Starlit Mantle down. They still need a second spell to get around it, but now Ertai's up to counter that second spell, and they kind of need like a third spell that they weren't planning for. Don't mind that. It might even be more fun to counter the first one with Ertai with some dumb enchantment we don't care about anymore, then do the Starlit Mantle when they think we're tapped out. I think Ashiok's Erasure is a pretty interesting card because it is a counterspell that is an enchantment. I know they can get their spells back if this leaves the battlefield, but I think if we use this on a commander, they will absolutely put it back in the command zone, and then we have this to sacrifice to Ertai whenever we want with no real penalty. And Caliphate, Beloved of the Sea, is another enchantment that we can sacrifice if need be, but this one protects all of our other enchantments with sort of a ward 1. It's not really ward 1. Ward is abilities as well. This is just spells, but it's something. Hey, me again, Darksteel Eric, just reminding you to like and subscribe. It really helps out Darksteel Industries. And now, 2 ads, 1 fake, 1 real. We here at Darksteel Industries want you to feel at home. We make quality products that take care of you and your family. Our home assistant, Darksteel Ingrid, can take on all the little tasks you don't want to do. Alarms, calendar items, or checking the weather. We also manage all of your internet passwords. A mandatory feature. We want your trust. We think we've earned it. And now, the real ad from the Wizards Tower, wizardtower.com. Not only are they a great content site for deck techs, strategy guides, and more, Canadian players get to use code BREWDOUBLE to get 5% off your order of Magic singles if you spend $20 or more. Money off your Magic singles? We trust that sort of deal. And now back to the show. And so one of the coolest things to do with sagas, in my opinion, is to blink them. Even those ones that flip into creatures will blink back into sagas so we can get that value over and over. Flicker of Fate is a perfect card to just do that once, do it at instant speed, any creature, any enchantment, quite nice. And then Skybind really looks appealing up front. We're going to be hitting lots of constellation triggers because obviously we've got tons of enchantments, but you have to bounce a non-enchantment permanent. And the reason I think this is okay is because we can always bounce an island. The island comes back at their next end step untapped, which is exactly what Ertai needs to counter a spell. We've got sagas that are flipping, coming back as creatures. We can cast a couple of enchantments in a turn. I can see a few constellation triggers happening at once with Skybind. I don't hate the idea of doing this to a few tapped lands, have them come back at the end step untapped for possible counter magic. And there is a pretty cool non-enchantment permanent that I would like to bounce with Skybind. Rona, Disciple of Gix. Unfortunate name. Every time we bounce Rona, we get to exile a saga from our graveyard, and then we can cast it again. Yeah, sagas are historic spells, so we gotta go looking for Historic Matters cards. Jorah's Familiar jumps out at me, making all of our sagas cost 1 less. Wrath Capuchin lets us cast our sagas at instant speed. And then the Weatherlight gifts us more sagas every time we connect with people. Not bad. Now I did mention we're going to be doing a lot of blinking. That's where Displacer Kitten comes in. It's over $10 already because it's so versatile, and I think that's mainly because it counts when you cast a non-creature spell, like a saga, and it lets you bounce a non-land permanent, like a saga. A lot of these flicker or blink spells have to be on creatures, but Displacer Kitten is a great one in the deck. And then something I would love to keep bouncing, Doomwake Giant. Doomwake Giant comes down, everyone gets -1/-1. If I can flicker this one time, that's -2/-2. Heck, if I can flicker it a couple of times, which isn't unreasonable, you can sort of clear the board. And then something like Doomwake Giant's got me thinking, I'm going to want more than one copy of it. Cards like Copy Enchantment, Estrid's Invocation. These are great ways to get more copies of something like a Doomwake Giant, so every time I hit a Constellation trigger, my enemies are getting -3/-3. And Estrid's Invocation has the added bonus of actually triggering Constellation as it comes back in, even if you don't change what it's trying to pretend to be. So now we kind of have to look at other cool enchantments that are fun to copy, right? Ethereal Absolution. Ooh, I would love to get a couple of these on the battlefield. My team's huge, your team can't exist because they are negative toughness. I do want to address the fact that we are sacrificing enchantments sometimes to make things happen. Plus, things are just going to die, that's how Commander is, so we're going to want ways to bring these things back. Brilliant Restoration, very clean card, it just brings back all of our enchantments and artifacts from the graveyard to the battlefield. I think brought back, if timed right, can do a lot of work. It only costs 2 mana, which is nice, and some of our sagas do go to the graveyard on their own. That happens, we use Ertai in a turn, get them both back. Sagas don't care if they're tapped. And then something like Cleansing Meditation, it seems really weird up front because why do I want to destroy all enchantments? But then you read the threshold and then you're like, oh yeah, because I will get all of mine back. And like a bunch of Constellation triggers. So we've got a counterspell in the command zone. That's pretty rude, a little bit villainy. So should we lean into it a little bit? I like Athreos, God of Passage as an enchantment and as something to put just a little bit more pressure on our opponents as our stuff dies. And the other Athreos as well. I could put those coin counters on my own enchantment creatures so that if they die or I have to sacrifice them to Ertai, I will get them back right away, but it is far too tempting to put these on opponent creatures. When they die or go into exile, you can't stop it. And if we're talking being a little bit drainy, a little bit mean, here's another enchantment I'd love a few copies of. Court of Ambition. It's 4 mana, gets the Monarch going, which I love in a multiplayer game of Commander. It's really my favorite mechanic. And just imagine having a couple of these on the battlefield. Even if we don't have the Monarch, our opponents have some real tough choices to make. Gosh, if we do have the Monarchy, whew, good luck everybody. At this point in the deck, I want to talk about a couple of neat moves I wasn't able to fit in other categories. Captivating Glance is a really interesting card. Clashing is weird. It's a little bit like everyone's Scries, but the neat thing about this being an enchantment is that we will get control of the creature, which we want, but if we lose the clash and we lose control of the creature, we can just use Ertai to sacrifice the enchantment and then no harm, no foul, right? And I also want to highlight Celestial Ancient. It's not really Constellation because it doesn't matter when they enter, but whenever we're casting enchantment spells, we're putting +1/+1 counters on all of our creatures. So maybe that with Flux Channeler becomes a good idea. Again, Flux Channeler cares about non-creature spells. It doesn't say instants or sorceries. All those sagas count as proliferate. I want to return your attention to an enchantment saga that I talked about already. Michiko's Reign of Truth. Giving a creature +1/+1 for each artifact and enchantment is very powerful if you're running a deck like this. It could be like 10, 12 a turn. So are we a Voltron deck? We've got cards like All That Glitters or Ethereal Armor. These things can give a creature tons of +1/+1. Even Eidolon of Countless Battles, which doesn't work for enchantments in general, but it will do quite a bit of work. Night Howler, same deal. I'm not building the deck to put a ton of creature cards in all the graveyards, but this thing just adds a lot of power and toughness to cards it's bestowed on. And then to round it out, you throw in a Whitewater Naiads to give our commander unblockable every time Constellation hits. We're doing tons of commander damage. This might be a commander damage kill, and even if it isn't, we can probably get a few Constellation triggers and just do tons and tons of damage. Whitewater Naiads make something actually unblockable, and another enchantment that does that is Archetype of Imagination. It doesn't technically give everyone unblockable, but when your stuff flies and your opponents can't, it's sort of like being unblockable. Ooh, mean deck, but a fun one. And only going to get better when Dominaria comes out. And in the meantime, you keep being you. The world is a better place for it. See you next time.